I am working towards scoring a 99 percentile score on the GMAT, and I'm sharing every single minute of my GMAT preparation journey on video. What gives me confidence in getting to that score is that I have, in fact, scored a 99 percentile score on the GMAT before. However, that was several years back. The challenge this time around is that the test format and scoring methodology have undergone significant changes. That throws up a simple question. Can I equal or beat my previous GMAT score when I'm taking the GMAT Focus Edition? This is day 25 of my GMAT prep. After a marathon day 24, which was a Sunday, I decided to take Monday off just to give myself a break. So today is a Tuesday. I have two goals in mind for today. Here are my goals for the day. I will continue my data insights preparation with a focus on the table analysis question type and the two-part analysis question type. I am currently working on optimizing my peak accuracy on both of these question types. Depending on how I'm feeling with my practice set today, I might pivot my focus towards improving my velocity on one or both of these question types. Because I'm coming back from a one-day break, I also want to keep things simple today. So that means simply doubling down on my data insights preparation. To keep things consistent with my study plan, I will go back and practice some quantitative reasoning questions tomorrow. There is one important note. While I'm going through the practice set today, I will also start incorporating some of the learnings which I had identified while taking the practice exam on day 24 of my GMAT prep. Two things in particular. Using a pen that has thinner strokes, something between 0.4mm to 0.6mm seems to work best for me, and practicing hitting the ground running with all question types. If you don't know why I arrived at those points of feedback, you might also be interested in watching my video from day 24 of my GMAT prep. With that said, time for me to jump into the practice set. Alright, so I am about 3 hours in at this point. In that time duration, I went through 3 table analysis practice sets and 1 two-part analysis practice set. I was not only solving each of the questions, but also checking my answers, reattempting any questions that I answered incorrectly on the first attempt, and finally reading through the solutions in the online question bank for questions that I was able to answer correctly. Overall, I have already begun transitioning towards optimizing my velocity on these question types and identifying key principles which will help me maintain the velocity I need to get through 20 questions in 45 minutes on the data insights section of the GMAT. I will cover some details for each practice set that I went through today, but note that this is not a tutorial video, so I will skip past a lot of detail, including some of the principles I have identified for myself to manage the trade-off between accuracy and velocity on these question types. Let's start with table analysis. Today was only the second time when I was actually practicing problems of this question type. As you might already know, unfortunately, the official GMAT guide only has 29 questions of this question type. So being conservative, I broke that down into 4 practice sets of about 7 questions each. I had taken the first of those practice sets on day 24 of my GMAT prep. On the first table analysis practice set for today, I answered 7 questions in 30 minutes and I was able to get all of them right. The biggest change I made on this practice set was limiting how much I was writing down on paper. If you glance at my notes, you can see that I only really wrote down about 1.5 pages worth of material through the entire practice set. I made that choice deliberately because I know that limiting my writing can help me boost velocity. However, on this particular practice set, my intention was to see how writing less affected my overall accuracy. The fact that I was able to answer 100% of the questions correctly while severely limiting the amount of writing that I was doing on paper tells me that it is a potential strategy I can explore to boost my velocity on this question type. An important call out here. I have said several times across several videos that writing things down on paper is actually good for your GMAT prep and in many cases good also on the final GMAT exam. That said, once you have developed a clear mental model of how to approach certain problems, you can begin to cut down on the amount of writing you do to gain on velocity. However, if you start reducing the amount of writing you do prematurely, you will not only end up making more mistakes, but also lose out on the opportunity to conduct a deeper performance analysis to help you improve. A good study coach will be able to help you understand the trade-off between accuracy and velocity and train you to make judgments on when to do what. Moving on the second table analysis practice set, I made a conscious decision to try to push on velocity while sticking to the rule of minimizing how much writing I was doing on paper. On this practice set, I took 15 minutes to answer 7 questions, and I was able to answer 6 of those 7 questions correctly. So clearly you can see the velocity boost and accuracy drop versus the previous practice set. In the preceding practice set, as well as on the table analysis practice set which I had taken on day 24 of my GMAT prep, my accuracy stood at 100%, but I was taking about 4.5 minutes to get through each question. On this practice set, I took about 2.5 minutes per question, but I clearly suffered on the accuracy front. Talking about the question I answered incorrectly, the reason I got it wrong is because I made an error in reading a value from a table and then comparing it to some other values that the question was asking me to compare it to. The question was asking me to identify the median of a property and then compare that to 3 or 4 other values. The overall list had a total of 19 values. So obviously if you sort the values in order, the 10th value is the median. In trying to push on velocity, I made an error in calculating the position of the median. So I did a rough math of 19 divided by 2 in my head, which comes to 9.5. And from there I picked the 9th value as the median instead of the 10th. Now that is clearly a minor error, but that is exactly the kind of errors that will begin to creep in if you start over-indexing on velocity. That said, this is an error I want to remember so that the next time I'm trying to push on velocity and I get asked to identify a median, I don't end up making the same mistake. The biggest thing I want you to notice, I'm incrementally testing different mindsets and approaches on each practice set to identify what I can improve. Experimentation is the key to learning anything. And if you are unwilling to experiment, you will not learn anything and your GMAT scores will end up staying flat throughout your prep. Let's move on to the last table analysis practice set. This one took me 32 minutes in total, during which I answered 8 questions and I was able to answer all 8 of them correctly. In this case, I subconsciously gave up on velocity to gain on accuracy. As you can see, while there are things you can do to boost both your accuracy and velocity on the GMAT, you will inevitably reach a point where pushing hard on one of those two things will end up hurting you on the other. The only way out is that you will need to arrive at an appropriate trade-off so you can maximize your GMAT score. Personally, I aim to push hard on velocity on the data insight section till I am able to answer 20 questions in a span of 45 minutes consistently. I know that it might result in me answering a couple of questions incorrectly, but for me, I think that is a better strategy than aiming to complete 18 questions and guess on the last 2. Unfortunately, this is one area where there is no right or wrong answer. It inevitably boils down to individual capability and judgment. If you're at a place where you are struggling to finish more than 10 questions within 45 minutes, then the strategy I'd recommend for you would be very different than the one I'd recommend for someone who is consistently able to get through 16 questions in 45 minutes. On this practice set, you will notice that my note taking got a little bit denser than it was on the preceding one. Part of it is because the questions in this practice set involved more arithmetic. I'll focus on just one key call out from this practice set, and that is about a GMAT trap that I noticed while I was going through it. One of my habits is that while I'm going through a practice set, if I notice a GMAT trap that I think might get me in trouble at a future time, I proactively make a note about it in red ink. I do that even while I'm solving through the problem, even though it impacts my velocity. My intention is to just remember that information better for future learning. I will give you an example of a GMAT trap. Let's say you have a table analysis question which comes with a list of 21 people with different names, each of whom is wearing either a black t-shirt or a white t-shirt. A simple way to represent this information would be in a table with 2 columns. The first column would simply be name. The second column would contain the values black and white. However, GMAT will sometimes throw a twist into information like this by turning the second column into a question which simply reads, is the t-shirt color black? In this scenario, the second column would be populated by values yes or no. Overall, the information represented in both cases is the same, but the way it is captured in the second case adds an extra 1 or 2 layers of interpretation which you will have to do while reading information from the table. This can easily lead to all kinds of minor errors. Combined with the no partial credit rule of GMAT focus on the data insight section, getting hit by a minor GMAT trap like that can be very dangerous for your score. Let's talk about the 2-part analysis practice set now. On this one, I took a total of 21 minutes to answer 7 questions and I was able to get all of them right. To be fair, there was at least one question where I got a little lucky because I picked answer options using an approximation which might have easily gone wrong in hindsight. The good thing on this practice set is that I was able to answer questions at about 3 minutes per question. So that is a learning which I would like to retain, and depending on whether or not I have enough time during the final exam, I might index more heavily on accuracy or choose to make a similar trade-off by approximating like this again. Once again, I did end up catching a bunch of GMAT traps, which I will not get into here in the interest of time. Alright, so that is all for today. One last call out is that my study session today wasn't the most efficient, just because I was tired from the rest of the day. So I did get up from my desk and take a couple of walk breaks between the practice sets. Obviously, you will not see that on video just because I speed past those breaks. Let that serve as a reminder to take breaks between practice sets if you need to. At the same time, remember that you do need to train for the final exam, where you will need to be able to answer GMAT questions one after another for 90 minutes straight. With that thought, let me close for today. All the best for the GMAT, and I will catch you next time.